BBOR, Black Box Online Radio, coming to you from West Virginia. Today we're going to start with something different. We're going to be reading a little bit from Terrorism, How the West Can Win. We just have a little segment here. The moral wounds that terrorism inflicts on society include shaken confidence in the government and the rule of law, fear, and the conditioning of the public to outrage and lawlessness. By targeting innocent civilians, it also violates some of the most precious moral and ethical boundaries. To counter these effects, it is important that governments develop a sustained and resolute policy of resistance, active pursuit, and retaliation. Such a policy, however, must be reinforced by sanctions against those governments that collaborate with terrorists to wage a hidden war against their adversaries, particularly the West. 3 types of sanctions are viable: political pressures, ranging from international condemnation to severing of relations, can be brought to bear. Since most of the countries supporting international terrorism desperately need Western goods or credit, economic sanctions can also be effective. These may include trade sanctions, denial of commercial landing rights, or withdrawal of aid. Finally, unilateral or cooperative military action against terrorists and those that shelter them offers a 3rd sanction. And once again, this is from the book Terrorism, How the West Can Win by none other than Benjamin Netanyahu. Yes, that's right, the Prime Minister of Israel. I actually found out that he had written several books, and I wanted to see more of what they were about. Found a little bit of an excerpt online, and just to kind of make a few remarks, one of the first things that we can say about how terrorism inflicts something on society like the shaken confidence in the government. We had a little bit of that when we were discussing conspiracy theories earlier this week on the channel. And losing confidence in the government can be done in a variety of ways. For example, after the Bush administration was caught lying about weapons of mass destruction, the left wing, the Democrats, everybody on the progressive side lost an enormous amount of faith in the government, and that became sort of a breeding ground for distrust and even left-wing conspiracy theories, one of the things that is not talked about too frequently. But you could say very easily, after Bill Clinton and Hillary Clinton, the right-wingers lost an enormous amount of faith in the government. And you saw this very clearly from the 2016 election. By the time Hillary Clinton got to that level, there was just so much disdain for Hillary Clinton because of all the things that people were bringing up from the past. And I actually pulled up a clip of Adam Sandler doing his Opera Man gig on SNL, and it was from the 1990s, not the recent one, but from the 90s, and it was like, the first thing he talked about was Hillary Clinton and the Cattlegate scandal, where Hillary Clinton was possibly cheating in the stock market. A lot of scandals from Hillary Clinton really came to light. And so we just want to say, though, shaken confidence in the government can be done. It happens for an enormous amount of reasons. And what Netanyahu is saying here is that terrorism inflicts that upon society, but also the actions of politicians really can shake up the confidence in the government. Scandals as well can kind of do that to a lesser extent. Of course, the scandalous behavior of the Bush administration and of Bill and Hillary Clinton are nowhere near as extreme as what he's talking about, probably describing things that are more similar to Al-Qaeda and ISIS. But at the same time, it's just a different thing something that reminded me of a recent discussion that we were having on the channel. One of the things, though, is I noticed that this book, though, is titled about it's called Terrorism, How the West Can Win, but it's written by someone who would go on to become the Prime Minister of Israel, and Israel is, of course, in the Middle East, not the West, so I'm not really sure whose side Netanyahu is on, but, of course, the only side he's truly on is his own. But when you want to look at some of the ways that he talks about responding to terrorism, I mean, I definitely can see the severing of relations is a big one. And the sort of third one, finally, a unilateral or cooperative military action against terrorists and those that shelter them offers a third sanction. I guess so, but that is one of those things that we're just really trying to avoid. No more wars. Because as soon as we get caught up in these military battles, it turns into what is known as the forever wars. And there's a reason why so many people are speaking out against this. And there's a reason why so many people are talking about non-interventionism. Even if that's an ideal that they're striving toward, it's like they're sick of these wars. We have people going to Afghanistan who are younger than the war in Afghanistan itself. So they're just like, we don't want any of these things to turn into massive international conflicts that aren't going to end anywhere in sight. But one of the things, though, that's really interesting here is that many of the terrorist nations that seem to despise the West are very much in favor of using Western goods and Western products, and that was something that was mentioned here in one of the kind of sanctions that he was talking about. Now, Manfred Steger wrote a book on globalization, and I used to say one of the few benefits of Alex Jones was he actually starts talking about some of the issues, so you get a little bit more curious about it, and I wanted to learn more about globalism and globalization, and then you find writers like Manfred Steger to get some more info on the subject. And when it comes to Manfred Steger, he was saying a very good example of globalization and how it functions is, you got somebody like Osama bin Laden in a cave giving a speech trying to reach people around the world. And it's like he's condemning the West, but at the same time, he's using products that were designed by the West. He's trying to use technology that was invented by the West. He's trying to use distribution mechanisms like the internet. And many people, terrorists all over the world, whether it's not only Al-Qaeda, but also Boko Haram in Nigeria, they're using all their systems that were developed by the West, yet they condemn the West. It's horrendously hypocritical. So the canceling of Western goods is definitely influential in that, but it really shouldn't be downplayed how much these nations that Netanyahu is calling the terrorists truly rely on Western goods and services. Even if you look at the name Boko Haram in Nigeria, that means Western education is forbidden. Well, at the same time, though, how do they get their message out? People are talking about them all around the world on things like the internet, on things like televisions, perhaps radio broadcasts, YouTube user-generated podcasts. It's like their method of outreach happens because of an enormous amount of Western technology. And it's like, it is ridiculous to truly try and condemn them. And I mean, maybe at some point in life people are going to wake up and see the hypocrisy of this whole thing, but most people who are aware of the hypocrisy are probably already condemning the terrorists to begin with. Although I think, though, that what Netanyahu is talking about here is that when you want to talk about military intervention, it's like when terrorists do commit actions, nobody really wants to have a forever war. But as we saw after a lot of the terrorist attacks in France, I mean, as far as I recall, France did declare war against the Islamic State because it's like they were being attacked on their homeland. They're being slaughtered in the cities. They had to do some sort of military response. A more well-known example of that would be the U.S. military response after Afghanistan, although a lot of the people in the United States Congress and the Senate seem to regret their vote for that war if they knew really how long these things would last. But at the same time, how could you not respond to that? An interesting thing about that is only one person in the two houses of Congress did not vote for military intervention after Afghanistan, and that was Barbara Lee, the representative from the 13th District of California. The only person in both houses. That's what's famously reported. But Lincoln Chafee, who is the senator from Rhode Island, also voted against military intervention in Afghanistan. And then he said, by his own admission, his staff set the 100-meter dash record, ran to him, grabbed him by the lapels, and you have to change your vote. You have to vote for this. And he listened to his staffers, and I don't really know if that was the most courageous decision on Lincoln Chafee's part. Not saying that I was opposed to voting that way, voting either way. I mean, right after September 11th, I'm really not surprised at all that people voted for military intervention against Afghanistan. I mean, I think clarity of the situation might have been more valuable, but it's like, I don't really blame anyone for voting that way. But just the fact that Lincoln Chafee went against his own intuition as a United States Senator and did what his staff told him to because he didn't want to deal with the backlash, it's like craziness. But no, that's just an interesting thing. There was another senator that voted against military intervention in Afghanistan, but he changed his vote when he still had the ability to. Sorry for that little tangent, but just the big thing here is, do I like Benjamin Netanyahu? No, absolutely not. I mean, I would say that I despise him, but I'm not that mean. I think he's actually bad for the planet Earth. How about let's say that? Why would I want to read anything that he's written or discuss some of the things that he's talked about? Because you learn things. I mean, we talk about a lot of people on this channel that aren't very likable, but the fact of the matter is they're heavily involved with the world, and you can learn things by looking at people like Netanyahu, like Henry Kissinger, like Zbigniew Brzezinski, and you can learn a little bit more about how the world functions. So, I mean, I know that a lot of the points that I tried to make in this one weren't completely necessary to, or they weren't exactly on point with what Netanyahu was talking about. And I think it was more about trying to talk about some of these things here and expand upon them and show how they could possibly be connected to some of the material that we mentioned earlier this week on the channel. But that's all for me now. If you have any comments to say about terrorism, interventionist foreign policy versus non-interventionist, I would love to hear them in the comments section below. If you have anything to say at all about how these terror networks function, I mean, pretty general upload, but I would just like to say that's all for now. If you like this upload, you can hit the like button. If you haven't subscribed, you're welcome to subscribe. And until next time.